it's much more of a tax cut for those who are on the smaller end of the income scale. For someone who's a top income earner, this particular provision does not necessarily save them very much money at all. It's a rounding error. But for those who are on the 12 and 22% brackets, it's a meaningful benefit to them.
Welcome to Stewardology, a podcast where two worlds collide. In this show, financial advisor Tim Russell and Pastor Drew Gysi are joined by me, producer Tyler Rutherford, to explore the intersection of financial stewardship and theology. Their unique perspectives help Christians and churches understand and apply a biblical framework for everyday financial decisions so Christians everywhere can grow in their walk with Christ through biblical stewardship. Before we get started, we just wanted you to know that the topics discussed in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations. Investment and investment strategies involve risk, including the potential loss of principal, and past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Securities and advisory services are offered through Genius Wealth Management, member FINRA, and SIPC. Without further ado, here are your hosts, Tim Russell, Drew Gysi, and Tyler Rutherford.
Welcome to the Stewardology Podcast. My name is Tim Russell, and I'm here with my hosts, Drew Gysi.
Hello there, everybody.
And Tyler Rutherford.
Howdy.
And today we are tackling a topic that has been thrust upon all of us lately. You probably have heard a tremendous amount of information about it and probably are sick of it by now. We are sorry. We are going to do the Stewardology podcast treatment of the one big beautiful bill, sometimes called OBBBA. OBBBA. There you go. OBBBA. So the one big beautiful bill, we are not going to call it the OBBBA because that's just nuts. But we would love to spend some time today and kind of go through some of the components of the bill itself and think about what are the ways in which this bill works itself out in the lives of ordinary taxpayers like you and me. So we're going to jump into this and hopefully have a phenomenal discussion. Now, a little background. Now, the big beautiful bill was passed into law on July 4th, Independence Day. Mm-hmm. The imagery was not lost on Donald Trump. He loved the idea of signing this bill into law on a national holiday, celebrating our independence. Interesting timing, interesting optics and visuals. Frankly, guys, it surprised me that he was able to get it done on time. In fact, in our other podcast, as you know, the Stewardology is a it's kind of a outflow of the Life Financial Group, our parent organization, and Life Institute. So at our parent organization, Life Financial Group, we have another video podcast that we do every week. That's a very short summary of what's going on in the markets. We call it Life in the Markets, and it's designed to be shorter, say 10 minutes. It's been averaging the last couple, as I've checked, it's been averaging anywhere from like 10 to 15 minutes. So it's not a long thing. It's what's happened to the markets, what do we expect in the week ahead, and a verse of encouragement, some motivation for you as you proceed through life. In this framework, I've been talking about the big beautiful bill, talking about the tariff deals, talking about what's happening within the broader market and economy. And as I'm thinking about this tax bill, I did not have it in my bingo card that would actually get it done. I felt Congress was too dysfunctional to be able to actually pass a bill through both the House and the Senate in time for this thing to meet the deadline by July 4th. I was really pleasantly surprised. But yet the bill's not all sunshine and roses. Like there's some stuff in this bill that I don't love, that I think is it's a waste of time and energy for them to be passing some of these regulations. But we're going to talk about it today. We're going to go through some of those components, and we would encourage you to just stick with us here as we work through some of these components. I would also encourage you to take a look at our YouTube channel where we're having a video version of this conversation, and you can skip around and find the different parts of the video that may particularly apply to your interests.
Yeah, this bill is big, but is it beautiful? We're going to talk about that. But anyway, I wanted to let you guys know, the audience, that because it's a big bill, this thing's like 900 pages plus, So we're not going to go through every page of this bill here on this podcast.
Oh, that'd be a snore fest.
Yeah, right? Really. We're just going to try to talk about what's going to be the most applicable to you, the listener, the taxpayer, but also know that if you actually want to read the bill, which there are some people that want to do that, they want to read through the whole thing, and God bless you for doing that, it is linked in our show notes, so you can actually go check out the behemoth, the big, beautiful bill, all on your own too. Today is part one. Today is the overview. We're going to go through some of the big pieces of this bill. Part two is going to come out actually in 2 weeks. Next week we have a special guest. Stick around for that. But part two, we're going to talk about some of the ethical, maybe even moral dilemmas, some of those things that we have, those qualms with this bill. Part three, we're going to talk about the misconception of, this thing's just a tax cut for billionaires, isn't it? Well, stick around. We're going to address that a little bit. In part four, which will be in the first Tuesday of September, will be all about how the big, beautiful bill impacts kids, the next generation, student loans, all of that stuff. We're gonna try to dig in and relay the information to you that's going to be helpful for you.
So to jump in today, let's take a look at some key components. And the first one we want to talk about is the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And
it's actually the extension of it.
The extension of it. Yeah. And then also the various tax brackets. So Tim, one who is a financial advisor who helps people kind of work through their taxes, we want to lean on you to kind of bring this together for us. So fill us in a little bit about this.
Yeah, well, so under the first Trump administration, we had the massive tax overhaul, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that took our tax system, and it was an attempt to simplify the tax code, to reduce the number of tax brackets, and to provide certain tax cut measures which would be stimulative to the American economy. Now, when they did that, in order to have those components, those tax saving measures placed in the bill, in order to get it through Congress, they had to use a sunset provision. That means that until a certain date, you could use this provision. After such date, those provisions would go away. And frankly, the entire Tax Cut and Jobs Act, not the entirety, but the vast majority, had a sunset for this year. 2025 was the last year that you would enjoy the benefits of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and afterwards we would revert to the Obama era tax code. Dun dun dun. So that's one of the things that we were really excited about with this new big beautiful bill is that, frankly, it said no. We're going to extend the period of time where the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act provisions still apply. Some of the things in that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they made permanent. Certain things they simply extended for another period of 5-6 years, something along those lines, which is better than nothing at this point. So let's just break this down. The tax brackets now are permanent, maintaining rates at 10, 15, 22, 24, 32, 35%. There's an inflation adjustment for different rates as well. So not the rates, but the income that falls within each category. Guys, what you need to understand is that by simply doing that, it helps the lower end of the income scale much, much more than it helps the upper end of the income scale. So they are allowing a larger range for 10 and a larger range for 12 and 22 and so forth. And in so doing, it's much more of a tax cut for those who are on the smaller end of the income scale. For someone who's a top income earner, this particular provision does not necessarily save them very much money at all. In terms of percentages, it's next to nothing. It's a rounding error. But for those who are on the 12 and 22% brackets, it's a meaningful benefit to them. It really is. So I encourage you to take a look at our show notes. We have the brackets listed there where you can see the exact amount of income that is now under the new big beautiful bill and how that works, whether you're single, head of household, or married filing joint.
Matthew 22:21, and now you probably know this, but I'm going to share it anyways. You may say, how does this fit? And it is render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And this verse reminds us to balance our civic duties with our commitment to honor God with the resources that he has put into our care. We need to make sure that we pay our taxes well. They've put these new brackets in, or confirmed these brackets.
Expanded
the brackets and added this nice inflationary piece for it. But the important thing is to realize that's done to help you out. It's done to help out the person that they're struggling maybe a little bit, so they're going to be able to get that adjustment with the inflation. The question is, how are we going to use what is still going to be allowed in our pocket? It's not just going to be a continual creep out into our taxes. Yeah. So we want to encourage people, pay your taxes, pay it well, be grateful that you live in this country, but also remember, let's make sure that we use what the government is saying we want you to keep. Let's make sure we use that well also.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Why don't we move on to the second provision I think that's worth discussing, and that is the no tax on tips. The reality, and it's no tax on tips and it's no tax on overtimes. And the reality is that it's a little bait and switch here, because it's not that we're not taxing tips or overtime. We're simply giving, and I say the government's giving a deduction for certain classes of workers or certain income ranges to be able to deduct a portion of the tips and a portion of the overtime wages from your income. So it is a form of a deduction. So here's how it works. The provision allows for workers to keep more of their tips and more of their overtime, essentially up to $25,000. But here's the catch. There are phase outs for higher income earners. For those in the service industry, or for those who are working extra hours, this could mean a little bit more take-home pay to work on building their savings or paying off their debts. There are a lot of things here that could help them with not only supporting their families, but also supporting ministries. So I think there's some benefit here. As we look at the deductions, one of the things that you need to understand, let's talk about the no tax on tips for a minute. There's a phase out once you reach, I think the number here is for a married couple filing joint, the phase out ends up starting at about $300,000. So that's for every $100 over the phase out limit, there's a reduction in the amount that you can deduct. It's $25,000 of tips that you can deduct, but there is a secret little thing that it's not so secret, but I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to it. When you claim tips on your tax return, what they're saying is that there's no federal income tax on tips. What they're not saying, and what is actually implied, is those tips are still subject to FICA tax or Social Security and Medicare tax. So you say there's no tax on tips, which in a way is true, but in a way is also somewhat deceiving, because you're still going to have to pay, and it's 15% for tips, because Correct. You're technically acting in this sense like a self-employed individual. So you have to pay the full 15%. So the goal here was to get people who are taking under the table tips, put them on the tax return so it's there, so that we're actually realizing and capturing all the income in America. That's a good thing. The downside is that because we're still subjecting the income to Social Security tax, we're still disincentivizing people from claiming all of their tips.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but I want to jump in real quick. I personally like this, that they're saying that Social Security will be taxed on their tips. I like that idea, because some of these lower earning people that rely on these tips, what happens when they get to those retirement years? They've been stuffing their pockets, but spending everything. Yeah. They actually get a blessing in the end to be able to have that count as their Social Security return to them. So again, I see it both ways, but I've always had a heart for those that are just going in that direction and not having to pay that, and now they have a lower return in their later years.
Yeah, no. I understand your point, Drew, but I honestly don't think most of those individuals are going to elect to pay more in taxes.
I agree.
Because more money today is better than hypothetical money in the future. So
Correct.
While in theory it's a good idea that income goes towards your taxable wage base
Right.
for Social Security purposes and could potentially increase your future Social Security, there's this idea that we have as economic beings, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. So while in theory it's a good thing, I think in practice, people who were lying about their tips before are going to continue to lie about it in the future.
Yeah, and I think there's truth to that, but more and more employees, let me go back, more and more employers are actually counting tips that are going out the door. My daughter,
Yes,
she has a part-time job working at a restaurant, waitressing, and she has to make it known to the employer at the end of the night, these were the tips. So that's a very important piece. So she actually got caught multiple years ago, and I use caught loosely, where she was not putting money away for her taxes on the tips, and she kind of had to catch up and pay a big tax bill on that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I've been listening to a bunch of podcasts and watching videos on this bill in preparation for recording this today, and there's been multiple sources that say, hey, we're still waiting on guidelines from the IRS to actually figure out how to do all this, because who's to stop some employers from recategorizing what is wages and what is tips and kind of
Correct.
fudging the system a little bit, right? So yeah, I think we're still waiting on guidance to figure out how to do this like to the T, and we have to remember to act with integrity through it all.
Absolutely.
Too.
Amen.
Well, so that's actually a phenomenal point, Tyler, because the reality is that what Congress did is they kicked the can down the road about being very clear about what classes of workers can qualify for this.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be for everyone. You can't reclassify income. They have very clear guidance in the law about what constitutes a tip. And if it's expected and built in, it's not a tip. That's compensation. That's got to be put on a W-2. That's different. If it's unnecessary and gratuitous, right? It's a gratuity. Then it's able to be subjected to this deduction, this $2,000 or $25,000 potential, up to $25,000 deduction. Mm-hmm. If you have $5,000 in tips, you can't take $25,000 of deduction. You can deduct up to the amount that you earned in tips to a ceiling, a cap of $25,000. But let's transition now for a moment over to the overtime question. So it's the same thing. It's actually $25,000 for married filing joint, and it's $2,000 or $12,500 for a single individual, for a head of household or a single tax filer. It has the same kind of income cap. So we'll see the ability to deduct this from your income phasing out on the higher income earners. And this is the other thing that I think a lot of just average Joe people don't understand. When you work overtime, you earn an hourly wage. So let's just say you make $20 an hour, and when you do overtime, they give you time and a half. So it's $30 an hour. Here's the thing. When you work overtime, you don't get deducted the $30 an hour that you work overtime towards this $25,000 deduction. It's actually only the 0.5. It's the time, it's the half a time that's added to the time and a half that you can deduct. So it's the $10 per hour. You still have to pay ordinary taxes on the $20 an hour. So that's something to keep in mind. You can't deduct every dollar of wages you make in overtime. It's just that little bit of extra.
It's just that overtime.
Exactly.
Piece.
It's just it's not just the overtime. It's the time and a half
Yes.
of overtime.
Yes. It's at halftime.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Halftime.
You guys see how confusing this is?
Yeah.
Right, so I said it's
We
the time
love
and a half.
our
No,
government.
it's not the time. It's the half.
It's the time.
It's not the time. It's the half.
Do
Everybody that
your
works
time,
overtime-
not to hit.
Everybody that works overtime, the balloon's just deflated. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's face it. It's still a help, right? Every
something,
little
yeah.
bit helps.
Every dollar helps, especially for those that are the hourly workers that are out there. I think that is a big blessing to them to be able to have a little bit more in their pocket.
Now, let me just go tax nerd on you for just a moment. In the tax code, there's something called, rephrase it. It's. I don't think it's built into the code, but we, as tax people interpreting the code, talk about something being above the line or being a below the line deduction. Above the line deductions or below the line deductions. When I say above the line deductions, the line that I'm referring to is the line of your adjusted gross income, sometimes referred to your AGI. Okay? These are deductions that, if you look at your tax return, there are a series of things. You get W-2 wages, interest, dividends, IRA distributions, annuities and pensions, Social Security income, business income, capital gains. These are all lines that are showing your income. And then before they calculate how much your adjusted gross income is, they allow certain deductions. So an example of that would be capital losses, or it could be education or educator expense, HSA deductions, IRA contributions. This is, by the way, is a traditional IRA contribution, student loan interests, half of your self-employment tax if you're self-employed. By the way, that's the 7.5% of Social Security. If you have to pay 15, you can deduct half of that 7.5% as an above the line deduction. You add up all of your income, you subtract these certain expenses, you have your AGI. We have a chart showing this in our show notes, so I'd encourage you to go take a look at it. But then we have the below the line deductions. Again, the line here is referring to the adjusted gross income. Now, we're all familiar with the below the line deduction called standard deduction or itemized deduction. Now, for the people who may not be so attuned to their tax return, I would encourage you, pull out your tax return. You'll see this. Everyone who files a tax return gets to take a standard deduction or an itemized deduction. You take the larger of the two. And itemized deductions is listing all of your medical expenses, your tax payments, your mortgage interest deductions, charitable giving, and we add up all of those different line items, and you get to take that number or the standard deduction, whichever is larger. Now, the standard deduction for a married couple is increased, and that's something we'll probably talk about at a later time, but it's closer to $25,000. I don't know. I'll have to actually pull up the...
I think it's like $31,000 actually.
Yeah, so I think that might be for...
Right?
Is that the extra they give to seniors? I don't know. We have it in our show notes here. So regardless, it's a big number. So most people get to take the standard deduction. So you take your adjusted gross income. Let's say it's $30,000. It's you make $100,000 adjusted gross income. You deduct $30,000 from it, right? That's your standard deduction, which means that your taxable income is then $70,000. You made $100,000, but you're only taxed on $70,000. That's a handy little thing.
It is.
Now, there are a couple extra deductions that the new big beautiful bill presents to us. Not only before we have for business owners, there's it's called a Section 199A deduction. It's qualified business income deduction, which is a phenomenal way you could deduct 20% of your business income or business profits from your earnings as well. So if you had just say a side gig where you're working self-employed and you make $20,000 from there, you can deduct 20% of $20,000, which is not chump change. It's $4,000 you get to deduct right off your income. So you have the $30,000 deduction plus the $4,000 deduction, which means that you're now taxed at $66,000, not the $70,000. That's not a bad deal. All right. There are a few others. Now, this is where you're going to see the seniors deduction, the special $6,000 seniors deduction show up. There's the new charitable deduction, which we'll talk about shortly. There's the qualified deduction for tips, the qualified deduction for overtime, and a few others. The car loan interest deduction. Those all look like they're going to come as a below the line deduction. So it is a meaningful benefit. It reduces your taxable income. that is really helpful for you. Remember, we talked about the tax brackets earlier, the 10, 12, and so forth, right? The 20, 22, 33, 37% bracket. Those brackets are we only apply your taxable income to it, not your adjusted gross income. So every deduction we get from your adjusted to your taxable helps lower your overall taxes because we only take that taxable amount and throw it into the table. That's helpful. All right. So Tyler, you went through and looked at the numbers, and you are correct. We have a married filing joint standard deduction for 2025 of $31,500. And we'll have the deduction numbers in there for other categories as well. So that's a meaningful deduction.
Yeah.
Not many people are paying more than $30,000 in taxes and charitable giving and mortgage interest. All right. We should probably move on to talk about car loans.
Oh boy.
I like cars, but I don't like car loans.
No. You can, under this bill, deduct the interest paid on certain car loans for cars purchased that are A, new, and B, within a certain period of time, 2025 through 2028. You can deduct up to $10,000 of interest on a car loan. Now, how much of a car loan or how much of an interest rate would you have to be paying to have $10,000 of interest on here? I shudder to think what the stewardship implications are for people paying $10,000 a year for a car loan interest. That's
Just interest.
That's nuts.
That's crazy.
That's nuts for a depreciating asset.
Crazy.
It's a terrible idea. Fundamentally, I hate this provision. I think this is an absolute gift to the car dealerships.
Oh, absolutely.
The car lobby got a big win here. It does not help the normal consumer, in my opinion, because it presumes that the normal consumer is going out and buying a car loan or buying a car and getting a loan. We have advised and encouraged on this podcast and our ministry side that do not borrow money for a depreciating asset is not a good idea. So I don't want to get too far down this route because we're going to talk about this in later podcasts. This is one of the provisions that I think is the worst provisions in this tax bill. It's just not a good idea. It results in much more. I think it leaves people poorer. And they potentially would go out and buy a car they can't afford, get a loan that they probably shouldn't afford, all to be able to deduct a little bit of interest.
A little bit.
Do a little bit of math with me here. If you pay $10,000 in interest and you get to deduct it from your income, you're probably saving yourself, let's just be generous and say you're in the 22% bracket, $2,200. So you spent $10,000 to save yourself $2,000. Is that a good idea? No, it is an absolute asinine idea. Don't buy a car that you cannot afford. Don't get a loan that you are going to be paying back through the nose on just to save yourself on taxes. You are not saving yourself in the end. You might save yourself $2,000 on taxes, but you'll still be out $8,000 net to the car loan company, to the bank.
Tyler, I see you typing away over there, and I see a smile that's kind of popping out of your face there, and I think you're crunching some numbers. Am I right in saying that?
I see. This is where things may not make sense, and I'm not. I tried to figure out how big would a car loan have to be to pay $10,000 of interest per year at a 6% interest rate, and it's saying that it would be around $160,000 for the car.
Yes.
But isn't there a cap on the value of the car that you could buy to qualify under this?
There's a cap on the weight, not on the value.
On the weight,
Oh,
yes.
okay, gotcha.
It has to be under 14,000.
And it's got to be a U.S. manufactured vehicle or assembled. At least, assembled in the
Final
United
assembly
States.
has to be done in the United States. Yes.
That's so interesting. That's wild.
So
That's a big car loan.
$160,000.
So the problem is that I think there's an income cap to this as well. It's $250,000 for married filing joint, and a $200,000 a year tax filer should not be buying or getting a car loan for $160,000. That's the math just doesn't work.
I was just going to say, do the simple math.
It just doesn't work. Look, this is a provision that is a gift to the banks and to the car industry. It is not at all something that's good for the American consumer.
Yeah, and partly because we say save, then purchase a vehicle. Don't take out automotive loans. We're not fans of those things. And that's partly why that's not good stewardship to be able, Tyler just said 6%. That's a roundabout number. Some people, I'll say for used cars, they're spending more than that because their credit rating is poor and they jack it up quite a bit. I was talking to somebody within the last month or two, and I think they're paying like 13 or 14% on a used car loan. Ouch. Not wise, not good.
No, not at all. So Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes to poverty. My word. I feel like Solomon wrote that proverb with this provision of the bill in mind. And I know that's very reductive. Please forgive me. But guys, don't be hasty. Don't just run into getting loans just because you can deduct it from your income tax. It is a terrible idea. You remember, if you have $10,000 in interest and you're in the 22% bracket, it saves you $2,200 in your tax bill. $2,200. That is it. That is all it saves you. You're still paying $10,000 in interest.
That's not even your loan payment, $2,000 for
No,
that car.
that's right.
Not even a month.
That's right. It's so stupid.
It's
It
crazy.
is so stupid. All right. I'm a little like,
Bring it
dial
down.
Tim.
Bring it
Dial
down. Bring it down.
All right. Let's move on. Charitable giving. We should probably talk about that.
That's a much better thing.
Is it? It is, but the provision is kind of wonky.
Yes.
All right. So I've got good news for the vast majority of the people listening to this podcast. You are now able to deduct $1,000 if you are single or $2,000 if you are married, filing joint in 2026 as a below-the-line deduction. Remember, we talked about that just a minute ago. A below-the-line deduction on your tax return without having to itemize. Remember, we said that you have to have $31,500
yes.
to be able to itemize. You have to have more than that to itemize. So most of you don't have that, but you are still doing charitable giving. So keep track of your charitable donation receipts because you can provide that to your tax preparer, and you can take up to $2,000 if you're married, $1,000 if you're single, for a charitable deduction as a below-the-line deduction on your tax return. That is a phenomenal thing. But now we get to the part where it gets a little bit of interesting. The new big beautiful bill in 2026, this does not apply for this year, 2025, but in 2026, they put a new 0.5% AGI floor to your charitable giving. So in other words, think about it this way. There's a hurdle that you have to overcome before you can start deducting your charitable gift. So let's hypothetically say you itemize. You have $40,000. It's your mortgage interest deduction and your tax payments because you're in a higher bracket. And you have your charitable giving. You're in a higher bracket. You're making more, so you're giving more. Let's say you're giving $20,000 a year away. That's a pretty nice donation.
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. If your adjusted gross income is $200,000, that means you have essentially a 0.5% that you have to meet that doesn't get counted towards your charitable gift. So if you make $200,000, you give $20,000 away, the floor is 0.5%. So that's $1,000. Is my math right on that? You guys can double check me. I think that's right. It's $1,000. That means that you can only deduct $19,000. So you don't get to take the first 0.5% of your AGI as a deduction. Bear with me here as we're still trying to figure this one out. This one is a confusing part of the provision. It doesn't make sense. It's on your cash donations. You can donate cash, you can donate non-cash items like stock, bonds, and mutual funds. But the deduction here for this 0.5% of AGI floor, that applies to all your deductions. You can only deduct $1,000 and $2,000 of cash donations. So you can deduct everything. So if you donate some stock, if you donate business interest, you donate art, boats, things like that, cars, you can deduct the whole thing above the hurdle, the floor that they put in here. Is everyone thoroughly confused about this? So it took me a long time to wrap my head around it. I still feel like I've got to wrap my head around it a little bit more, but this is a provision that I think is super confusing. I don't like the fact that they put a hurdle that we have to jump over. By the way, if you give more than the ceiling, by the way, you're only allowed to give so much money. Did you know that? I have to rephrase it. You can give more. You can give as much as you want.
Yeah.
But you can only deduct up to a certain amount of money. You can only deduct up to 60% of your cash donations against your adjusted gross income. So here's the funny thing about the provision. If you give away 61% of your income, let's say you made $200,000, you gave away 100, and what is the number? It's $120,000, something like that. $122,000, which is incredibly generous. Praise the Lord for that. In that case, you would be capped. You would not be able to deduct the full amount. So you could only deduct 50%. So what is that number? It's $100,000. Everything above that, you get to carry forward, including the floor, that 0.5% of AGI. So if you want to be able to deduct it, you have to give an awful lot and then deduct it in future years.
In future years, yeah.
So you don't lose the deduction. You get to carry the deduction forward for 5 years and use it in future years against future income. All right, we should probably move on. Just one scripture piece here from 2 Corinthians 9:7. Drew, you want to read that for us?
Yeah, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves what? A cheerful giver. And I think that's important for us to know, that our giving should come out of the cheerfulness of our heart, what God has stirred up within us, the blessings that he has given us, not because of a tax deduction that we're going to get. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be of our love for God and generosity towards his work that he wants to do in and through us in that generosity.
Yeah. All right, next category, we're going to talk for a moment about the itemized deductions, specifically the new SALT limits. If you're not familiar, when we talk about SALT limits in itemized deduction, SALT stands for state and local tax. State and local tax, SALT. In the provision, you can deduct your tax payments, but not all of your tax payments. You can't deduct your federal tax payments, but you can deduct on your federal return your state income taxes and your local taxes and your real estate taxes. You add up those number of all the taxes that you're paying in those categories, and you can reduce that number or add that number into your itemized deductions to reduce your overall income. Now, under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, this is the first Trump tax bill, they capped it at $10,000, which means that a lot of people living in states with high tax burdens or individuals who make a significant amount of money, who pay a lot of taxes or own houses with a high tax bill, these people are losing tax deductions and having to pay more taxes. So a lot of people have been crying about this. Being capped at $10,000 is a frustrator. Mm-hmm. So what they did is they said, well, now you can deduct up to $40,000 a year in deductions. Well, that sounds phenomenal. That sounds like it's going to help a lot of higher income people living in expensive states. It sounds like a great deal. However, this is the biggest nothing burger I've seen in a long time. The people who make this kind of income, I think there's a ceiling to this. It's $500,000 AGI. There's a small group of people who make enough to do itemized deductions, and yet don't make too much to lose the SALT deduction. Here we are, standard deduction, the SALT deduction. It's going to help maybe a small percentage of tax filers out there. And if that's you, praise the Lord, that's phenomenal. Use that deduction, take that income, pay off some debt, build your savings, do more charitable giving, do more retirement savings. Those are good things. On the flip side, The rest of individuals who make more than that or don't make enough for that, again, it's a major nothing burger. It doesn't really help enough people in my estimation.
Tim, before we move on, there's something interesting that I read about a senior deduction as well. Do you want to bring us in the loop on that?
Well, yeah, this goes back to Donald Trump's promise, no tax on Social Security income, which sounds wonderful. And I had a lot of clients who were super excited about this provision. It's one of those things where it's like, sounds good, but in reality kind of doesn't work out that way because of the realities of politics and getting things done through Congress. They couldn't just say, Social Security is not taxable anymore. So what they had to do, the workaround, was they're offering a deduction, an extra deduction for individuals who are 65 years or older to deduct against Social Security income. So the way this works is that there's a $6,000 deduction for seniors in addition to the higher standard deduction. Remember, we talked about that earlier. We said the standard deduction's $31,500 for a married couple. Now you get that, and you get an extra $4,000, so $2,000 per senior, per married couple individual who is over 65. So one person over 65, it's $2,000. Two people over 65, it's $4,000. So you have $31,500 plus maybe the $4,000 plus an extra $6,000 per senior over 65, $12,000 per married couple over 65. If one's over 65 and one's under, you only get the one. Okay, so that's the factor. And then you're essentially getting a huge deduction now. So we add the 31, we add the 31.5, add the 4, add the new $12,000 deduction. We're looking at a deduction of income of $46,700 for that couple. And the math doesn't work exactly right. I said it's $4,000 for a married couple. There are other places that says it's capped at $3,200. So it's kind of one of those things we'll have to wait and see how it works out. But this should be, I believe, a below the line deduction that will go along with our standard deduction and so forth, which will help to counter affect the tax impact of Social Security. However, there's a couple things here. There are caps to how much income you can have and still get this deduction. If you make less than $75,000 as a single individual or $150,000 as a married couple, you get the full deduction. But over 75 and over 125, there's a phase out for where that deduction happens. I think that for the single individual, it's a phase out from 75 to 125. And for married couple, it's from 150 to 250. It's a $100,000 range for them, which means that for every $1,000 of added income, there is a 1% reduction in benefit. Does that make sense? So as you stair step up the income spectrum, you're going to lose some of the benefit, but you'll still have the majority of it if you're like at, say you make $175,000. Well, that's only $25,000 above. That's a 25% reduction in your the deduction amount. So
and it would be just that deduction that is offered to seniors.
That's just the senior deduction.
So it
That's
does
correct.
not impact the standard deduction.
And we have a chart that we'll throw in here into our show notes that you can go and look at that kind of shows you how this works for a single person, a married couple with only one spouse over 65, and a married couple with both spouses over 65. It's helpful to be aware of. All right, let's talk about a couple credits that are expanding.
Child tax credits. That's the next one.
What is the current limit?
$2,000, and it's been hovering there for quite a while.
Well, since the Tax Cut and Jobs Act,
Yeah.
it raised it from $1,000 to $2,000.
Yep, my kids only got that $1,000 for each of them. They're old.
I hear you. But $2,000 is a meaningful benefit. It was supposed to revert back to, I think it was $1,000 or
think that's what it was,
$1,500.
something like that.
But this was expanded and made permanent by the Big Beautiful Bill, and they adjusted it to $2,200 per child, and they added an inflation adjustment to the $2,200. By the way, $2,200 starts this year, I believe.
2026.
Well, the inflation adjustment, I think, starts in 2026.
Oh.
So that's one thing we may want to look into a little bit deeper to verify. But yeah,
It's one thing about this bill. Some things were like effective immediately.
Yep.
Some things don't start
Yeah.
for another 6
Yeah.
months. So pay attention to that.
and some of the provisions start right away, but like certain other parts of that same provision are delayed in when they come into effect. So that's
as mud.
That's a factor.
Clear as mud. Yes, exactly.
And that's a credit. By the way, there's a difference between a deduction and a credit. A deduction is where I made $100,000. I get to deduct $20,000 from my income for any number of reasons. Therefore, I only pay taxes on $80,000. So it saves you, let's just say, in this case, $2,400 in taxes. That's nice. If you had, however, a $2,200 credit, a credit is like a tax payment. That is directly against your tax bill, which reduces the amount that you end up having to pay. And this child tax credit is refundable, which means that if you end up having more credits than you had tax liability and payments, you get to keep the difference.
That's a big win.
It is.
That's a big win.
All right. So a couple other things that we notice are removed from this bill. We have the clean energy credits. Under the Big Beautiful Bill, there's a repeal to the credits such as those for electric vehicles and home energy improvements. So by the end of 2025, the home improvement, like this is solar panels, and there's a credit and deduction for some of those credits go away. For vehicles, I believe it's actually September or October that those credits go away.
Yep.
So that's a factor. If don't go out and buy a vehicle just to get a credit. I think it's a bad idea to be forced into doing that. And don't go out and buy solar panels this year just to be able to get a credit. It's not worth it.
But they're fear-mongering people into doing that right now. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I will tell you, we both, in the end of our conversation, talking about what they got hoodwinked into purchasing the solar panels for their home, they are going to be paying out the wazoo for a very, very long time. And the adjustment that they will have in a lower electric bill is very minor. So the bottom line is I'm all for solar. If I could justify it, I would probably do it. But the cost factor and the labor factor and the life expectancy of solar panels, along with the efficiency of them, it's just not adding up right now.
The technology is not where I think it will ultimately be. One of the things I told a recent client prospect of mine is that at this point, I would hold off on these bills because, or taking advantage of this credit and spending all this money for the solar panels. He had the cash. He was going to do it in cash, but it was going to take him, he calculated, something like 15, 20 years to make that money back.
Yeah, it's usually right around 20.
And just to do that at this point, to potentially save on your electric bill is probably not worth it, because we expect that maybe within the next 5, 10, 15 years, the cost of those panels are going to come down, the efficiency is going to go up, and the potential benefit will be significantly increased as the technology improves. So is our hope and expectation. We'll see. So just bear that in mind as we go. This technology is new. It will improve. Don't be the guinea pig. All right. We should probably move on. We've got a couple other kind of notes for other components within the bill that are going to have potential long-term financial impact and societal impact potentially. One of them is this Trump account. You guys heard about that Trump account?
Yeah.
I did.
So if you have a baby between it's 2025 and 2027, the government will put, allegedly, $1,000 a child into a Trump account. Now, here's the thing. There is no clarity or guidance on what exactly that means and how exactly that happens. Who creates the account? Who opens the account? Who funds the account? In addition to the $1,000 the government will put in, for anyone you can open a Trump account and you can put $5,000 a year into it. And what's interesting is they allow it to be for $5,000 for you as an individual, but the $5,000 cap, anyone can put that money in, including businesses and nonprofit organizations can fund money into these accounts for the benefit of these kids. The couple things to keep in mind, these accounts have to stay in index funds, so like an S&P 500 index fund. It's probably not something that you can work with a financial advisor on. Again, there's not any real guidance about this. There's probably a lot more to come in the next couple months about how they'll work, but just based on the way they're positioning this, the way they're talking about it, I don't think it's going to be something where a financial advisor is going to be able to particularly help you with. Again, more to be determined on that point. And you can't touch the money. You can't touch the money until you're 18. After 18, there's, I think it's like 50% can be accessible for a period of time, but it's designed for like buying a home, starting a business, going to school. There are certain qualified expenses. And if you don't use it, it can stay in the account and grow tax-free for retirement. So the tax status of this bill is also somewhat a question. Is it a Roth IRA? Does it grow like a traditional IRA, or is it something entirely different where it's part Roth and part traditional? And honestly, it kind of sounds like it's part Roth, part traditional. The money that you put in is tax-free, but the growth is tax deferred. That's how it sounds to me.
That's what I think I heard too.
But we're still waiting for more guidance and clarity on this point.
When I first heard about this, I was more excited than when I read about this on a deeper level. But like it's just that like from a tax perspective, it doesn't seem very interesting. You're using after-tax dollars, money that's already been taxed, to put into an account that you're probably going to be taxed on later in life. That's all not crystal clear yet.
Right.
It's just I feel like you have more options when working with a financial advisor to do something that you have more control over and that you know more about. I mean, it's cool. If a free $1,000 is a free $1,000. Like,
sure.
You know what I mean? But it just, I don't know. I'm not too excited about it.
Well, so one of the arguments for it is the power of compound interest.
Yeah.
We've talked about this in the past. We've had that episode about the magic of compound interest. Mm-hmm. It's a phenomenal episode that kind of helps us understand how compound interest works. And the younger you start, the longer you allow it to compound, the more it could potentially be. Yeah. And $1,000 at birth going until age 65 could be a massive growth.
Big win.
Yeah, absolutely. The catch is you've got to leave it there, not actually touch it. So could it be massively wealth generative? Yes, potentially it could.
It's one big, beautiful win.
Well, maybe. But you also have to leave it there. You have to not touch it. You have to have the discipline that when it's, $100,000 and you really want to buy a house, you can leave it. You could take it at $100,000. You can leave it and it could become like $1 million. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that house cost you $1 million of potential future growth. Again, there's no guarantee. Markets will go up and go down. Like, investing always involves risk. You got to say all of those things, but still, past performance is at least a guide for the future. It's not a guarantee for the future.
That's a good way to put it. So what about 529 plans?
So there have been some expansions of how 529 plans can be used under the bill. They expanded the scope of the allowed deductions for K through 12 expenses. So you can use it now for, there's a whole series of things. There's, I'm trying to remember them all now. Tutoring, certain materials. There's a whole list of things that you can use for post-secondary education. Oh, it also includes a certain amount of, like if you're taking a standardized test, what are those tests that you have to take?
The SAT.
SAT, that's the one. Yeah. Wow. It's been a long time since I took that test. The SAT, the ACT, some of those other tests. You have testing fees. You have application fees for schools. You have tutoring for those tests. All of those things now are qualified deductions. And the amount of money that you can deduct tax-free in a calendar year for those K through 12 has been increased. I think it was $15,000. It's now $20,000.
Yeah. And so another nice thing is they also have in that provision for parents that do homeschooling too, which is a wonderful addition to be able to make sure that they can use
homeschooling materials,
the materials that they're using for that, which is wonderful.
Yep.
Student loans are another one that's been interesting to see. There's been new caps on how much you can borrow from the federal government and how you do that. And at different, we'll talk about this more in part 4 of this series, but different levels of education, you have to take certain kinds of loan versus others, subsidized versus unsubsidized. We'll get into that later. There's also big changes to the way in which you pay your federal loans. Right now, like as of 2024 and first half 2025, there's a lot of different options for like income-driven repayment plans. I believe all of them are going away, and it's going to be replaced with one income-driven repayment plan or a standard repayment plan, i.e. you could choose to pay a fixed amount over the course of like 10 to 25 years, and that is your fixed amount, you're going to get it done. Or there's an income-driven repayment plan. I think it's called the Repayment Assistance Program that will be tied to your income based on how much you make. And then after 30 years, theoretically, the loan is forgiven. Doubt that will actually happen, but that's the way it's being pitched. So those are the two big changes in the student loan realm.
Just a quick note about that loan forgiveness. Don't bank your future goals on repaying that loan. Again, I had a conversation recently with someone where we're looking at that, and I really charged this individual to not bank on that, to take your own future in your hands at this point. Save, grow your income. Don't try to keep your income artificially low. Keep yourselves in a poverty mindset and a poverty status just in the hope of getting the loans forgiven. It's not worth it to you, to your family, and to everything else.
I believe only about 4 or 5%
it's so low
of those loans that people are hoping would be forgiven actually have been forgiven. So you can't even bank on that. Like, don't think that that's a sure thing. If it happens, hey, great, but don't rely on that. Yeah. Too dangerous.
Just reaching back into the grab bag here for the goodies of the big, beautiful bill. There is something with regard to Medicaid and SNAP benefits that has gotten a lot of press. A lot of people really hot under the collar about this. I honestly don't think it's that big of a deal.
I would agree.
But here they're saying we're going to take medical benefits away from millions and millions of people, SNAP benefits from kids. I think the reality here is what they're doing is that there are now work requirements, and it's so draconian, so difficult work requirements. And it's like $20 20 hours a month.
A week. 20 hours a week. Pretty sure it's 20 hours a week.
No, it's not.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a month. It is not that big of a requirement. So you do have to work a modest amount, or do charitable, like volunteer time for charitable time, or be looking for a job or in education. Like there are certain things that qualify in order for you to continue getting your benefits. And they also say that, by the way, these benefits are not allowed for people who do not have legal immigrant status. So illegal immigrants are not allowed to get Medicare and other forms of income. So Tyler, you just pulled out here one piece. It says actually it's it's
80 hours per month.
80 hours a month you have to work, so it is 20 hours a week.
20 hours a week.
Average 20 hours a week.
Average. Yeah. Okay.
Which still is not, I mean, that's a part-time job, that's easily doable.
Yeah. Part of the frustration with this is you look at 15 different news sources and you actually get different numbers.
Yeah. You do.
Because again, Tyler referenced the bills in there. I would encourage you to take a look at it, make heads or tails of it.
Yeah.
We're having lots of people pouring through this bill trying to make heads or tails of it, and some of them are coming with different numbers. So I'm trusting that's 80 hours a month is accurate, but there's some.
But that includes volunteers. But
Yes.
that even
Education,
needs to be that even needs to be calculated, and who are they
correct.
volunteering with?
Well, they've got to have it.
Who's signing off on that? So
gotta
there's a
have
lot of
documentation.
nuances here.
Yeah, as you do your own research on this bill, be careful. Like Tim just said, people are coming out with different numbers and different things. Part of the reason for that is there was a lot of speculation on this bill before it was actually signed into law. And so there was a lot of different people saying different things. What was it like during the House debates? What was it like during the Senate debates? What was it like when it was sent? There's a lot there. So go to our show notes, check out the actual bill, and use reputable sources when you're doing your research in all of this.
Yeah. So maybe the next thing we'll do before we close here is just answer the question. is this a tax break for millionaires and billionaires, or is this rocket fuel for the economy? In our last episode, we're going to go deeper into this topic, but one component of this bill is the qualified business income deduction. Remember at the beginning, we talked about the below the line deductions. I said there's your standard or itemized, and then there's extra item. It's called the 199A deductions or the qualified business income deduction. You can deduct 20% of your profit from your business from your taxable income. That's handy deal. However, under this new big beautiful bill, they have raised that limit to 23%, I believe, as a deduction against those expenses. Now, there are income caps and there are some caveats in there, but this is something that is not going to necessarily help the millionaires and billionaires. The average business in America is a small business, has less than 10 employees, has less than $1 million in revenue. We're not talking about massive organizations. This helps a lot of small mom and pop type people reduce their tax bill because they are the employment engine for our economy. The vast majority of individuals are not employed by these megalith corporations. Vast majority of Americans are employed by medium to small businesses. So this will help more Americans, not necessarily the millionaire or the billionaire class. Yes, will there be help for them in some respects with these components? Certainly. But it's not just as simple as saying that this is some kind of tax cuts for billionaires. There's one other component that I'll get into really briefly, and that is the ability to straight line deduct expenses on building an investment here in America. So businesses that build out infrastructure, that build warehouse and manufacturing and other capabilities inside the United States, they can accelerate the speed at which they can deduct those expenses. Now, in normal business, you have like 35 years in order to deduct that money. So let's say you spend $1 million on a facility. You can take 1/35 of that every single year. It's a depreciation deduction. Under this new big beautiful bill, we can bring more money into America, more jobs into America, more manufacturing capability into America, employing more people here in America, creating more high-paying jobs here in America, and be able to deduct that expense right off the top of your tax bill. It is an immediate tax deduction for the millionaire and billionaire class, but what it also does is it creates a huge boom in growth, in construction, and in employment. So while on one level, this is a reduction of revenues to the government, on the other level, all of that money being expended and deducted is showing up on someone else's tax return and will be taxed as ordinary income over there. And this is, in some ways, new lines of revenue, new lines of income for the government. I actually think it will be rocket fuel for our economy and fuel for average Americans to grow their income and hopefully get out of the lower class into the middle class and beyond. It's a good thing. So let's not get upset about this.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dig into that episode. That'll be part 3. So come back in a few weeks and get in on the conversation.
So as we've explored this one big, beautiful bill act, that's not my best Donald Trump, but, it's something. It brings a host of changes to the tax code.
We're going to win so much, she'll be tired of winning.
It's so
big, so beautiful. It's like my hair. It's awesome.
You guys do that so much better than I do. Well, while these changes can be very complex, the stewardship principle remains the same. Manage what God has given you faithfully and wisely. Whether it's taking advantage of these new tax breaks to increase your giving, use it for savings, pay down debt, or investing in your family's future, every financial decision is an opportunity to honor God. And so we want to encourage you. Have that mindset moving forward as we kind of dive in, not just in this episode, but in the upcoming episodes. Have that mindset. How can I use this new, big, beautiful bill act to actually become an even better steward of what God has put into my care to take care of my family and to have greater impact for kingdom purposes in the days to come.
Well, until next time, take care. God bless, and have fun reading through the big, beautiful bill. God bless.
Thanks for joining us on the Stewardology Podcast, where financial stewardship and theology meet. We'd like to help you take your next steps in biblical financial stewardship. Subscribe in your podcast provider to get the newest episode delivered to you every week. Leave a 5-star rating and review to help new listeners find the show. Take advantage of your free personal stewardship review at stewardologypodcast.com/review. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website at stewardologypodcast.com for tons of free resources and hundreds of free episodes. You can also leave episode ideas at stewardologypodcast.com/idea. Remember, Psalm 20, verse 7, some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. See you next week.